Welcome to WOW, the Woman of the Week podcast series by Pharma Voice. This episode was made possible by a generous sponsorship from Diaceutics. For more information, visit diaceutics.com. In this episode, Taryn Grome, editor-in-chief of Pharma Voice magazine, meets with Sharon Shacham, Ph.D., founder, president, and chief scientific officer at Karyopharm Therapeutics, Inc.
Sharon, welcome to the Pharma Voice WOW podcast program.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be part of it.
Well, we're excited to have you. I did, obviously, a little bit of research before we were to speak this morning, and your story is amazing. Can you please tell our listeners how you founded Karyopharm?
Let's go back a little bit. My background is in computational biophysics, and in my Ph.D. and then in my first company that I was the technology founder, I was focusing on using algorithms developed on the computer to create three-dimensional models to complicated proteins and then use those models to facilitate drug discovery. Before Karyopharm, I wanted to use this approach to identify proteins that are very important for the survival of cancer cells and then develop drugs that will inhibit them. And I was spending about 6 months looking for some of these pillars of cancers, if you may. And I don't know if you know, but Dr. Michael Kaufman, my husband, is the CEO of the company. And back then, and he developed already 2 cancer drugs, and I would ask him, what do you think about that? And every time he would say, that's a bad idea. Yeah. So that went on for 6 months. Every dinner he would kill another idea of mine. And then when I came up with the idea of inhibiting nuclear export, he couldn't kill it. So I was now I have to do something with it. And that's how we started to work on the nuclear export.
That had to make for some interesting dinner conversations, I can imagine.
We need to ask the kids about that.
So literally you started the company by yourself at your, let's say, for lack of a better word, at your dining room table, and you discovered this compound.
So just to be accurate, it was in the kitchen, I have to.
Okay.
Yes, I thought about the idea, and then I used these algorithms to do some in silico screening. We bought the original compounds, and we found the original hits. And we did store the compounds in the refrigerator for a while until we tested them, but the kids look fine, so I guess it was okay.
Yeah. Nothing like moving the milk aside to find the compound. So this is about 12 years ago, correct?
This was in 2009.
Okay. So you, from a one-person operation to now a 300-plus global company, has your mission for the company changed along the way?
No, we always looked, and we are still, this is our mission, is to develop new therapies for patients with advanced cancers. And selinexor was the first one, and we got the approval in the first indication, but we hope to expand the use of selinexor in many other cancers and then to advance our other compounds through clinical trials to approval in some of these indications, some new indications.
Awesome. So as President and Chief Scientific Officer, you work alongside your husband still in the company. So how is that dynamic? How does that work for you all?
Well, that will need more time to discuss. But we share the same passion for medicine, for patients, for science. This is a big plus for this. We are both entrepreneurs in our nature. We are both impatient, so that makes it more interesting. I think we should ask the employees how they are doing with this, but we kind of find it took us some years, and we managed to put, this is yours, this is mine, this is what we do together. And so far, I think it's an amazing journey. I wouldn't want to do it with anyone else.
I was going to say sometimes that shared journey, because you are working long hours and there's so many ups and downs in terms of that drug development process, that it must feel very good to have somebody who's in your corner and that you can share that experience with.
Yeah, and understand the ups and downs, and understand, when a patient doesn't respond, or when an animal model doesn't work, or when the chemistry fails, that someone that understands and is okay when you bring work home from time to time.
Sure. So let's talk about one of those highs, and that is the Xpovio. Did I say it correctly?
Yeah.
That you brought that drug from inception to FDA approval. Talk to me about what that process was like for you all.
So think of the biggest roller coaster you ever been on, and now multiply that by 100. Let's see. Getting drug approval, it must be a mission and a vision, and it's consuming, and it should be. So there was, and every success or every milestone that is being achieved until you get the drug approved is so big, and it's such a high. And then when things don't work, it's really, really tough. But we got the approval for selinexor in last line myeloma on July 3rd, and then we went out and there were fireworks, and we felt that the fireworks are for us that day. So
I love that. And why shouldn't they be? That's great. So the New York Intellectual Property Law Association recognized your scientific research and achievements for Xpovio with the 2019 Inventor of the Year Award. That's pretty significant. What does that recognition mean to you?
A lot. And, I would say as a female leader, as an immigrant in this country, it is so important. I think I was the first woman that got it in maybe 10 years, I'm not sure. But it's so important that this work is recognized, that we can speak about it, and I hope that it encourages our other women to pursue their dream and try to become leaders in an industry that is still today is heavily, at least at the top, includes mostly men.
Absolutely, it does still include mostly men. So what are some things that you think that can help to change that dynamic so that more women can achieve their dreams? What are some of those barriers that need to be broken down?
I would say that there are barriers that are objective, and there are some self-imposed barriers for women. But the way so in California, there are more women than men in general. It's a very diverse company. We speak, I think, about 20 languages within our over 300 employees. And even in the executive team, I think it's almost equal men and women. And what's interesting is that it's the network that help us. So once we added the second woman and the third woman, then when we are looking for another person, because it's such a small community, then you use each other network. And once we expanded, above my network, we had the head of regulatory that joined, Ms. Tanya Lewis, and we used her network, and the general manager in Israel, and at Mizrach. And once we started to use all these networks, we found out that we see many more CVs for high-level, for women at the high-level roles. So it's very important that you actively do that. The second one, I think, is and I think some of it is our nature, and well, I don't know the reason, but what I know about women is that we don't use our feathers as much as men. I know when I meet with my female leaders, they'll always talk to me. I'll come to the meeting, and they will ignore all their success, which is huge, and just talk to me about what are the obstacles they are facing now in order to achieve their goals. And obviously, it's not everybody is like that, but in general. And then when you meet men, many times they'll say, oh, did you see how this worked, and did you see how amazing that was? And we'll focus time celebrating the success and then move to discuss what are the issues. And that's in middle-level management, that's fine. When we move into executive level, board seats, and et cetera, it's very important to come with a story and to discuss your success and to highlight your success. And I think we overcome it at Karyopharm by providing a lot of mentorship to the female leaders.
That's fantastic. I was going to ask you, do you consider yourself to be a role model, and how are you modeling that role?
So since I'm like all the, I don't like to use my feather. But I hope I can be a role model. And many women entrepreneurs contact me, and I will always try to help. Either it's when they are trying to start a company, and they not only in biotech actually, they talk to me. I will use my network to help them, and also sometimes we just meet in small group of women and just talk about the issues and provide mentorship that way.
That's wonderful. You noted earlier that as a woman and as an immigrant to the United States, what are some of the unique challenges that you have found that you have faced in trying to start up the company? Perhaps it's in trying to find funding, etc. What are some of those lessons that you've learned along the way?
So let me tell you a good story. So I started the company by myself. And I very quickly realized I had a group of people that helped me. Interestingly, most of them were from ex-US, but also some or Israelis that live in the United States. But I realized that I don't have the kosher stamp that you need from Harvard or MIT, which is how most of biotech companies start. So in a very Israeli way, I sat at Panera and wrote 10, 15 emails, cold emails to professors at Harvard, MIT, in the area that are participating in the scientific advisory board, and asked to talk to them, tell them about my idea. At that point, I had some data, share with them my results, and see if they can join. I have to say many of them actually responded. I think most of them, and quickly. But the first one that responded, Dr. Ron DePino, that later became the president of MD Anderson, he actually said, come, I want to meet with you immediately. By the time I was home, I already had the first email, and he became one of the founders of the company and a mentor for me and a great friend and a great help for us to push the company forward.
Wow, so he really saw something not only in your science, but in you to take a leap, I guess.
I think so. And he added other people. His network was amazing, so we were able to expand, do more academic collaboration, understand the science better, get more results, and all of that was critical. But to your original question, I think some of it is being part of the club. That's when you are, when you come from outside, there is a club here of, where you graduated from and when you work and which companies you worked from. And I was outsider to all of this, so I had to find my way through the club.
Which isn't always easy because there's no roadmap. There's nobody that has a guide says this is how you navigate through this kind of closed environment. So you just had to figure it out.
Yeah, and I have to say for female immigrants, it's tougher. I agree with that. But on the other hand, there were really many people like Ron DePino and others that says, okay, we like this idea, we want to help you, and they helped me even before we got our first funding.
That's fantastic. Earlier you said you didn't really consider yourself to be a role model, but you are a role model. Talk to me about how you define yourself as a leader. You are sitting at the top of this company. You are having to marshal your troops. You have to keep them buoyed and motivated. How do you do that?
So I was an officer in the Israeli army, and I think the most important lesson you learn from there, and a lot of my leadership is built from that, interestingly, from when I was 18, a young officer in the army. And for me, one of the most important values as a leader is to lead by example, and to sit with your team. So when we have a tough time, when we have a complicated problem to solve, we work together. When we need to stay late, we stay together late. And some of our best night here is when we have to work late for a request by the agency, or and we all stay overnight and we make it into a party. But it's really never ask anyone to do something that I wouldn't do myself. Is to be more of a teacher, I would say, than a boss, and to show compassion. So this place is a little bit, even though we are over 300, we are still running it a little bit like a family. We know the kids of many of the employees. We know their stories, and we share our family issues, our family celebration, and this bond is very important.
And it's important to keep that kind of collegial atmosphere. It's easier to do when you're a smaller company, even though 300 people isn't small. But how will you manage that as the company continues to grow? You talked about having additional products in the pipeline. It's hard to keep that personal one-on-one connection, I would think.
It's very hard. It was harder when we moved to, from 5 to 20 to 50 to 100 to now 300. Some of it is to make sure that this kind of approach is also taken by the people that report to me and to Michael. And some of it is really just knowing that part of my time should be devoted to work with the younger employees and to spend time with them. For example, in the summer, we had over 20 interns from high school to graduate students. So about 10% of the workforce in Newton was intern in the summer. And we not only do it for them to do some job that no one else want to do, but we spend time teaching them drug development. So each of the head of function spend lunch with them and talk to them almost at least twice a week about what he does and how is it impacting drug development.
It's a nice way to keep that personal touch and still mentor that next generation. So it serves a dual purpose.
Yes, and we have to get used to our millennials.
And what is the difference in managing millennials versus the more seasoned professionals?
That was a tough one. Hierarchy is less important to them, so they feel it's okay to talk to anybody and get advice, and I actually love that. And they are very, very focused on their career path. So they would want to know from the interview, what are they going to learn here? And how fast? And being aware that to what this place provide them as a career advancement and learning opportunities from the very beginning, and make sure you deliver on that, is critical in order to keep employees engaged.
It's interesting. It's certainly not the way I grew up through the business. So to go in and be able to just walk into the CEO or the founder's office, that was not the case back 20, 30 years ago. So I do appreciate, like you say, that hierarchy isn't as important to them. They're looking for... Yeah. Yep, they're looking for a purpose in some ways.
Yes. And you have and the mission and the the mission of the organization is very important for them. How you deliver this mission. They want to make sure that as an organization we are involved in the communities. And these are all, I actually think, pushing us, the older guys, in the right direction, in important directions.
Understood. As you sit and reflect back on your career, is there something you wish you knew then that you know now?
Yes, we definitely did mistakes in pushing selinexor forward. One thing that we did that I think cost us 2 years of development was to push to the highest dose possible based on a very short dosing interval of 1 month, and not understand the chronic toxicities well. So we dosed selinexor in many indications to many patients in doses that are almost that are about 50% higher, or almost double, in some cases double than what was recently approved, and we even are now studying in other indications lower doses. And as I move now with the new drugs, quality of life of a patient that takes the drug every day is so important. So as a drug developer, you have the responsibility to really understand the toxicity profile. If you want your patient to take your drug until disease progression, then you have to understand how this will look like, not in a month, but in 3 months before you, or 4 months on a large number of patients before you select your dose. And that was that, as I mentioned, that really cost us a lot of time, and I think it also cost the reputation of the drug because it is considered. There are concerns about the side effects, but and it cost us time for the approval. Now we understand the side effects profile, and actually on the other side, we are very upfront about it, and we are very concerned about educating prescribers and physicians in the clinical trials to make sure that the patient's side effects and symptoms are being treated well.
Excellent. Talk to me about what's next down the pike for you all in terms of your pipeline. What's the next one that you are really focusing on?
So we submitted the NDA for the approval of selinexor in patients with relapsed refractory DLBCL that are not eligible for transplant or CAR-T. And I don't know if you saw, but in today's press release, the FDA accepted the filing. Obviously,
that's exciting.
And gave yeah. That was from the press release today. Then we have the Boston study, which is the phase 3 study of selinexor in combination with bortezomib and dexamethasone against bortezomib and dex alone. That study completed enrollment, and as we publicly said, we expect results in early this year. So that is still in the heme space, and then we have several studies, including a study in patients with liposarcoma and a study for patients with endometrial cancer. These are phase 3 studies that are ongoing. And then we have 2 compounds in early stage. One is another nuclear export inhibitor, eltanexor, and another one with a different mechanism of action.
Excellent. So we should be looking for more fireworks later this year. Hopefully.
I hope so, yes. I'm all for fireworks.
And finally, you've had a really successful and varied career. Can you identify one wow moment of your career that either changed the trajectory of what you were pursuing, or that stands out to you as really a pivotal moment?
Of course. And it's a moment, and I always say that to entrepreneurs, you have to imagine things because it's so hard. So when you're done and things are not working, you have to imagine a picture, and you're saying, okay, and that picture helps you move through this low place and get there. And for me, it was always to meet a patient that received selinexor. So we were fortunate enough to meet several of them. But when I met the first woman that got selinexor, I remember I came to she arrived with her husband, and I remember I was shaking when I shook her hand. And it was so humbling for me, and I was so grateful that she had the courage to try selinexor under clinical trial. She responded well. She did have a lot of side effects. And I think then she gave a talk to the company, and one of the employees asked her, so why do you take the drug if you have side effects? And she just looked at him and said, I wouldn't be here alive talking to you if I didn't take the drug. And, for me and for the other employees, when you meet that, it gives you all the energy and the resilience and the courage to move forward with what we do.
That is a wow moment. That's amazing. And it is that power of the patients that fuels so many folks in the life sciences industry. It's those personal moments that provide meaning to the work you do.
Absolutely. It's the most important thing.
Wonderful. Well, I want to wish you continued success, and thank you for sharing your story with us for our WOW podcast program.
Thank you very much for the time and for having me on the program.
Thank you for listening to this episode of WOW, the Woman of the Week podcast series. And thanks again to Diaceutics for sponsoring this episode. For more information, visit diaceutics.com. And don't forget to check out our other episodes at pharmavoice.com/wow. This 2020 program is copyrighted by PharmaLinks LLC.